I am so thrilled we could spend this next hour with our generous friend Bob. He's gifted us with literally hours and hours of videos and leadership tools that are truly worth a fortune. They're on our website, hisdeal.org. They are easily accessible to you under resources. Well, while we've been prisoners in our home for most of this year, we've had time to examine, to meditate, to ideate, and to get some of those projects that we tend to procrastinate. Today, Bob is going to help us anticipate. We'll be equipped to understand the seasons of our life and guide others using predictable patterns in every decade of life. I wish I'd known this brother long ago. Met him at Pro Athletes Outreach conferences, thanks to Norm and Bobby. And he came to work with our board of directors. He is truly the gold standard of executive mentors. He's trained thousands of leaders worldwide. My son, Tom, has even attended his annual seminars in Poland. He specializes in helping us focus with confidence. And I believe, men, that you'll look back on this day as a benchmark in your own personal growth, because I believe everybody needs a Bob Beal in his life, but there's only one, and today we've got him. Bob, it's been too long. Welcome back. Thumbs up.
Thank you, George. Thank you. First of all, thank you, George, for all the leadership you've given over the years to not only your team there, but to me as well, and your wisdom you've given and the encouragement. And thank you, Doug, for your kind words as well, and the relationship we've developed with both of you over the years to see the significance of what you're doing and the fulfillment in what you're doing. Today, I'd like to talk about decade by decade, in which life is surprisingly predictable decade to decade. And but before we get started, I'd like to ask you a question, each of you, a question. How old will you be in 10 years? In that decade, your life will be quite different than it is today. Just like 10 years ago, your life was different than it is today. Since 1976, I've spent probably 550,000 hours one-to-one behind closed doors where the masks come off and you can see what's really in the heart. And I found that there are some very, 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 very common patterns of the struggles and the excitements and the joys and the privileges of each decade. They're very common patterns. And given health, there's typically one word that focuses each decade. One word that can focus where you are at this decade of your life and where you will be. Today, what I'd like to do is give a quick 20 minutes. Let me set my clock to make sure I don't go over time. A quick 20 minutes to you, just as an introduction to the decade by decade material. And then what I'd like to do is give the rest of our time for Q&A, for any questions you may have about the decade you're in, the decade your friends or family are in, etc. Now, if I were your mentor today, what I would say is, listen in to each decade. Don't just wait for yours, but listen in to each decade to be able to apply it to your family and friends. If you have a 9-year-old, listen to that decade as to what they're experiencing. If you have a 30-year-old, listen to that decade. And when I get to your decade, listen up, because I hope it'll be helpful to you in seeing what you're, understanding what you're experiencing, seeing what's coming in the future. Now, let's start with children. I'm going to give you the single word for each decade for these decades, and they all begin with S. S. And the S word for children, 0 to 10, is security. A child is in your life, in your Sunday school class, your baseball team, your grandchild, your child, that is 0 to 10, the number one they have in their life at this point is actually security. And it is, and they're learning a high percentage of what they will do for the rest of their life by watching you today. They're learning from how you tell them you love them. which gives them a sense of unconditional security. It gives them a sense of when you're proud of them, it gives them a model of affirming a child, but it gives them a sense of, I'm okay. My dad or my grandpa or my mom love me. They're proud of me. They care for me, and you're providing a model. I've asked many, many, many people. I have a profile I do called the Unique Strengths Profile that I do before someone hires someone. I ask, what was your father's first name? Where did he work? Well, as you watched him, what were the three most important things to him at that point in your life? They think, oh, well, these three things. I say, what was your mom's first name? What was important to her? The three most important things. They may have told them to you, or you may have just watched them. But the three most important things to your parents were these 6 things. How important are those to you today? They look and they say, wow, they're very important to me today. Children, it's really important that you give them love without conditions. And you see that age 9 is the single most shaping year of a human being's existence, because that's where what you're comfortable doing today is what you are comfortable doing in the 4th grade, age 9. Teenagers, the S word there is self. And basically, I would encourage you, any teenager you have any kind of influence on at all, take them or encourage them to go on one mission trip. Because as you know, the teenager is caught in a world of me and mine. It's a self-oriented decade. But if you can help them go see a mission where there are people with less than them, they can be comfortable with what they've got instead of what someone else has that they don't have. 20s, the S word there is survival. You may think, well, Bob, why would a 20-year-old who graduated from Harvard or Cambridge or Berkeley have the word survival as a question? I've talked to a lot of 20-something-year-olds whose parents were wealthy, and they basically paid me my daily fee of $6,000 a day or $4,000 a day to sit with their children and talk to them about their future. And I say, let me ask you this. Are you familiar emotionally with the term survival? Oh, yes. It's like what they're wondering, what a 20-year-old is struggling with is, how do I survive, or can I survive in the adult world? How do I get a job I want? How do I pay for a house? Where do you get a car? It's like, how do I get married? They're wondering, can I survive in the adult world? Believe me, your child, the people in your life in their 20s, that's their struggle. And I would encourage you to help them see this concept, because they all think, in my 20s are a time when I'm supposed to know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I say, no. Your 20s are a time in which you're trying to decide what you don't want to do for the rest of your life. Basically, try it for a year. If you don't like it, get out of it. Try it for another year or two. If you don't like it, get out of it. I tell them, if you can know what you want to do by the time you're 30, you're way ahead. If you can't know till you're 40, you're still ahead. If you don't know till you're 50 years old, a high percentage of my clients figure out what they really want to do for the rest of their life when they're about 50 years old. So relax, 20-year-old. People aren't expecting you to change the world quite yet. When they ask you, what are you going to do now that you're out of school? They aren't trying to hold you accountable. They're trying to carry on a conversation. They don't know what else to ask you. 30s is success. Success is something that 30-year-olds just hunger for. They long for. They're focused on. But what it is, it's a slippery pole that they can't quite climb up. They continue just struggling to try to get to the top of the pole, but it's like greased pole. They don't know how to get there. I say, you are in the process of becoming successful. How would you define success? Try to ask a 30-year-old how they define success. They don't know what it is. I say, would you like me to tell you what success is? Because they think it's having $1 million or driving a new Mercedes or a Tesla or something. That is not it. I say success is simply having what you want and wanting what you have. But do you even have a clue as to what you want? It's like, so 30s is success. I'd encourage you also to have a 30-year-old find a mentor, because a mentor is ideally a mentoring relationship is a relationship, a lifelong relationship in which the mentor helps the protege realize her or his God-given potential. And so what you're looking for is someone who can help your 30-year-old who has got experience and they've got a network, they've got credibility, but they've got a relationship with that 30-year-old that for the rest of their life, they can help them realize their God-given potential. Your 30-year-old needs that. It's really important to help them. I wrote a book called Mentoring back in about 1990 that's still in print, where I basically explained this whole concept as being so critical for young leaders. The 40s, by the end of the 30s, what's happening, and I've seen this over and over and over again, but by the time you get to about 37, your focus becomes, I know I'm successful, but is any of it making any difference? Is any of it significance? Is any of it significant? And the focus turns to significance. Significance is simply making a difference that lasts over time. Here's the problem. A significant difference is one that lasts for eternity. And so a person who is in business often wonders, should I be in ministry? But the person in business can also say, I will support ministries. I will be involved in ministries at a board level or something like that. But the one and only thing you can do in this life that lasts for all eternity, you see, if you're trying to make a significant difference, but the difference you're making only lasts a year, it's only relatively significant. Therefore, in fact, it's insignificant. The only way you can make a significant difference is to do something that lasts over time into eternity. Help them see that. Now, here's one other thing. In your 40s, help them define their life work. Your life work, a lot of 40-year-olds are struggling with, what do I do? What's my profession? What's my career? I tell them that the word you're probably wrestling with is actually the word life work. They say, that's it, that's it. I say, what you're looking for is, what could you see yourself doing for the rest of your life? Can you see yourself doing what you're doing? Oh, no. Though then the quicker you can get out with a reasonable next steps to get to where you could see yourself doing something for the rest of your life, that's your life work. And you want to also tell them this, the person in their 40s, the 40s are the decade of greatest struggle of any time you've had. Look back in your 40s, if you're beyond 40, and ask yourself, what's been the decade of my greatest struggle? You'll find it's your 40s. But people in their 40s think, number one, I'm supposed to be rich already. I tell them, look, you're not supposed to be able to pay your bills quite yet. Your most productive decade, your most profitable decade is actually your 60s, not your 40s. If you can just pay your bills and put $1 aside for your kids' education, you're way ahead. Guys in their 40s go, but women in their 40s, wives in their 40s say, really? I thought this is the way life was going to be the rest of my life. I say, oh, no, 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 no. Your 40s are the toughest decade. Now, also realize this, that from 47 to 50 is really the toughest. The kids are teenagers. You've got a bigger mortgage. You've got 3 cars or 2 cars instead of 1. That's where your heart attacks happen. That's where your affairs happen. Your late 40s is the toughest decade of all. So help your children and yourself see that that's a decade. This is only a phase of life right now. When you hit 50, it begins to smooth out in a way it's almost impossible to believe. Now, the next decade is your 50s. What you're going to find when you hit your 50s, or your child or anyone hitting their 50s, your staff, from 50 to 53, every person I've ever talked to feels old on certain days. Every single one of them. I haven't found one exception. When they're behind the scenes, behind the curtain, they admit they feel old on certain days. They are not old. They're simply feeling past the age 50. What they are doing is breaking up life into age 0 to 100. They think, I build up to 50, and then everything is downhill beyond 50. I say, well, I can see why you'd feel over the hill if you saw life that way, but the reality is that's not the way life is. The way life is that Your 50s are the final decade to get ready to maximize your 60s, which is your most productive decade. You are just right now in your 50s, just getting ready to maximize your 60s. You're not over the hill. Your three most productive decades, your most productive is your 60s. Second most productive is your 50s, assuming health. And your third most productive is your 50s. So you see, when you turn 50, instead of being over the hill, you're just getting ready to maximize the next 30 years, the most productive 30 years of your life. What you're doing, the S word for the 50s is actually stride. You're hitting your stride. You're beyond the struggles of the 40s typically, and you're hitting your stride. The 60s is strategic. What you're going to find is that in your 60s, you don't have the natural energy you had at 35, but your thinking is far more strategic. And don't ever forget that assuming health, your 60s is your most productive decade. Not only do you want to remember that, you want to help your staff, your colleagues, the board members, your team members. You want to help everyone see that it's the 60s. Now, as George said, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of Christian leaders around the world. I can't remember who it was that you said was with Crude, George. I spent 10 years with Bill Bright, consulting with him. I spent a lot of time with Steve Douglas. He's the one who taught me what are the 3 things we could do in the next 90 days to make a 50% difference. I spent a lot of time with Campus Crusade, Jim Kennedy, Jim Dobson. I was on the board at Focused on the Family for 31 days. Josh McDowell, Adrian Rogers. I've spent time with men like George Tolles. Basically, I spent a lot of time with a lot of leaders. And do you realize that in their 40s, they feel pretty productive, and they are. In their 50s, they feel even more productive, which they are. But if you look back and you see where their most productive result was, it is always, with every single man I've worked with at that level, it's been in their 60s. Their network is in place, their experience is in place, their family is on their own pretty much. It's like they've got working capital. It's like your 60s are by far your most productive decade, not your 30s, 40s, 50s. So your 50s, you're getting ready to maximize your 60s. In your 60s, you're basically trying to figure out, how do I maximize these 60s? So that by the time you're 60 years old, ideally, you've got a very clear track to run on. And a part of Gail Sheehy wrote a book years ago where she said that today's 75-year-old is approximately as tired as our dads were at 65. Society and unions in America have taught us at age 65, you retire. Do not keep going. The reality is I'm 77 today, and some of the best ideas I've ever had have been in my 70s, not my 60s. My 60s were very productive, but my 70s have extremely good ideas. Probably the best idea I've ever had was in my 70s, about 75. So your 65 is not the time you retire. It's the time that you begin really focusing, how do I maximize who God made me to be? Your 70s are succession. What happens is that in your 60s, you're still full bore, but the minute you turn 70, like on your 70th birthday, all of a sudden something clicks in your mind and succession becomes a subject. This thing I've been building, who's going to take it over? Who's going to want to take it over? Who do I trust to take it over? How do I get them ready? Who on the staff could take it over? Succession becomes an obsession when you're 70. You want to define right here a semi-retirement bridge. What I mean by that is, don't go along at full speed and then drop off a cliff toward a retirement. Because what you're going to find is that, like a friend of mine said, it doesn't take long to go from who's who to who's he. And you go from who's who up here and then drop down to the bottom, who's he. It just takes you 3 or 4 or 5 years just to try to figure out what's going on. But if you can define a semi-retirement bridge between 70 and 80, where you basically got, here's full bore, here's half bore, And then eventually I can be just wannabe bored. Not bored, but just full speed, half speed, and retired speed. That's really important. Your 80s is succession. The word is, the 80s is slippery. I'm sorry, I misstated. The 80s is slippery. Often your health and finances are as unpredictable as what I call black ice. You all in the Northwest, you remember what black ice is, where you're on a pavement, but it seems like it's just raining, but it's actually frozen over, where you basically got it to where you don't know it, but it's very, very slippery. And when you're 80s, it feels like often, and those of you who may be 80 know what I'm talking about here, where your health isn't quite as predictable as it was. Your finances may not be as predictable as they were. And friends and family are passing away. You want to write out your advice, write it out, the best advice your family for the next 10 generations. Do that. And then 90s is sleep. I've spent a lot of time in nursing homes, et cetera, in the last 10 years with people in their 90s, and their focus is sleep. I ask them, what do you want to do in the future? I say, I want to go to sleep and not wake up. I just want to go peacefully to sleep and not wake up, because I don't want to grow old like I've seen my parents do, who are in misery all the time. And again, they're asking the question at a totally different level than they did at 20, 30, 40. How can I know I'm going to heaven when I die? And this is a question you want to be good at answering, or giving someone something in writing that shows them how to do it. I find it very difficult to share with someone verbally how to know they're going to heaven when they die. That's why in the book, Decade by Decade, we put in there, written out carefully, clearly, cleanly, how to know you're going to heaven when you die, so that you can give that 90-year-old a book to read, or if they can't read, that you can sit there and read it to them. So, like I said to begin with, what I want to do is give you a quick 20 minutes and then open it up for Q&A. So it's 44 seconds left to go in my 20 minutes. We did pretty well, didn't we? But what I'd like to do now is open it up for Q&A until the end of our time, because I would like to have it so that if you and I were sitting there just alone together, and you were wrestling with something, or if I were your consultant at $600 an hour, what would you ask me? And let me try to do the best I can at bringing some perspective. And often that perspective will be in the context of Decade by Decade, helping you understand something else that's going on in your decades or something like that. By the way, one word of warning, I may insist, I may insist that we take a 10-minute break here and there, because I drink about a gallon. That was my warning. It was 20 minutes was up. I drink about a gallon of water in the morning, and I have to take frequent restroom breaks. So sooner or later, we may take a 10-minute restroom break, and that'll be good for you as well as me. So I understand if you need breaks here and there. So with that background, with that introduction, how can I be of the very, very, very most help to you this day? Clem.
Bob, you're always so interesting to listen to. I love it. Hey, you wrote the book on mentoring. Question, how does one find a mentor? What's your advice for that?
What you're looking for, the key word you're looking for is experience. What experience do I need? Let's say you're looking for the experience of retiring. Well, you look for someone who has retired, who had that experience, they've gone through that experience, that has a naturally good chemistry with you. You have a good relationship with them, and you can say to them, would you be one of the people that helps me through the mentoring process? Help me understand through the retirement process. Help me understand what that is, how it works, et cetera. What you're going to find is that a lot of people don't feel comfortable being mentors. So if you ask someone to be your mentor, they may say, I'm not good at mentoring. But if you say, would you care to share your experience with me about the process of retiring? They'll say, sure. And then you can refer to them and you say to them when they're talking to you about it, say, well, as one of my mentors, I really appreciate how you've done this. And everyone is, I think, pretty much honored to be a mentor, but they don't always feel confident with it. So I look for two words, experience and wisdom. Experience and relationship. And then the third one I'd look for is I would look for young people that have, that you have a relationship with that need your experience, and consider becoming one of their mentors.
Probably very difficult to even search out a mentor given our circumstances these days. That's, you need to develop that relationship, and
Yes.
often in person.
Yes. And, but if I had to, I would also do it on the telephone right now. If I were sort of because there are a lot of people who'd be happy to talk to you on the phone. But just basically start with mentor relationships, and to say, who are the 10 people that I have really positive relationships with, and go ahead and ask them.
Bob, we had a question on chat. Somebody, Kurt Krieger, wanted to know what the S was for the 60s, and Marcus was kind enough to tell him it was strategic. But I would like for you to know that we're going to post the outline for Bob's entire presentation today on hisdeal.org. It'll be under August 2020 videos, and we'll have the video there probably by this evening.
Great. And basically, if you can remember just the S word, like when you're with a child, remember security. With your teenager, remember the word self, because they're very self-absorbed. When you're with someone in their 30s, remember what their emotional focus is success. How can I get beyond survival of the 20s into how can I be successful at what I'm doing? And once you begin watching this, you're going to see it over and over and over and over again. These patterns I've seen for 40 some years with, like I say, with the executives behind closed doors, when I'm listening to their hearts. When people pay me as much as they do per hour, they don't get behind the closed door just with me and say, well, I'm going to trick you and see if I can keep from fooling you and keep from telling you what we really need to talk about. When that door closes, bang, it is on the table. I'm wrestling with this. I'm paying you this much an hour. Give me some perspective here. And so I hear just the raw hearts going on. And I'm saying these are the patterns that I've seen over and over and over again. And some of the things that they find comforting, perspective giving at various ages.
Hey, Bob?
Yes.
I have a question, and I've shared this information a lot, but I'd love to hear your perspective. Many people, when I ask them what their most productive decade is, they say 40s or 50s. Mm-hmm. And they are maybe in their mid 50s, and they're going, yeah, but I don't even have any money. Yeah. I mean, I haven't really succeeded by the world's standards. Mm-hmm. What do you tell somebody like that? And they're like, I'm running out of runway.
Well, first of all, I tell them their 50s are their final decade to get ready. And someone would say 55. I explain the 55 stuff. And then I say, where do you really want to be when you're 60 years old? Let's get ready for that. So that when you're 60 years old, you've got all that 60s and 70s to really maximize who you are. And that gets them focused on the future. And then one of the things that I have in the 20s, there on your note, I have it in the book in the 20s, and I have it on your outline you'll see on your 20s, is that try to get a 20-year-old to commit to saving X% of their income and live on the rest for the rest of their life. I have a cousin who is, he's 2 years older than I am, but we were having breakfast maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And some way it came out, he is worth $20 million. Well, we grew up in the same little town with poor schools and no real opportunities really. And I said, Jerry, how did you become so stinking rich? He said, well, it was interesting. He said, when I was 8 years old, and this is a great story to tell young people, folks. When I was 8 years old, a friend of mine, Rodney, came to me and said, would you like to go buy a baseball glove with me? I said, sure, I'd be happy to. I didn't have anything else to do at 8 years old. So I said, he took me, we went over to this thing called a bank, and he put a little black book on the shelf or on the counter, and he said, I'd like $8.37, please. They gave me $8.37. We walked down to Gamble's department store. He said, I'd like to buy this glove, please. They said, $8.37, please. He said, he put it on the table. We walked out with a brand new baseball glove. He said, I said, Rodney, how does that work? Every time you want money, you just give them a black book and they'll give you whatever. Oh, no. He said, no. He said, what you do is you start putting money aside. And if you put enough money aside, then when you want something, you've got money in the bank. You go get it from the bank. He said, Bob, that made perfect sense to me that day. He said, I decided when I was 8 years old to put 50% of in a savings account for the rest of my life. He said, to this day I have. It's a savings or investment account. He said, I just live on what's left. And I thought, you know what? I don't have a big, what I call backup mountain, a big retirement account set aside, like you were saying, Doug. So I decided at that point that I would put all of my Social Security into that backup account, and I put anything that came in that I didn't absolutely need in that account, and I live on the rest of it. Today we have a very substantial backup mountain, what I call backup mountain. But if you do it when you're 20, it's not to put 50%. That's way too high. But get your children, teach them to put. You see, what happens is put 5 or 10% even in that savings account and live on the rest. If you don't, here's what happens: you get whatever amount of money you get, you spend it as lifestyle, and your lifestyle expands to meet whatever you've got. And you think, well, I will save whatever's left, but there's never any left. There's never any left. Your lifestyle expands to meet everything you ever make, no matter how much you make. So if you'll tell them to save, teach them to save X percent, and live on the rest, by the time they're 55, 60, they've got a substantial amount, hopefully. And again, if they're 55, they may have to put a higher percentage, but tell them, start putting this percentage aside and live on the rest. Even if it means you downsize your lifestyle to where it's affordable, start putting money aside first and living on the rest. Let your lifestyle be an afterthought to your savings and investment. And that has helped a lot of people, George, or Doug.
Let me ask Ray Brook a question. Ray, you were before retirement, a very successful salesman. What would you have benefited? How much would you have benefited by knowing this that you've heard today from Bob, if you had known it years ago?
Well, I would have sought out mentors. God gifted me with mentors, and He brought into my life what I needed. Looking back, what I didn't do, God provided. That's the same thing financially. Bob, I was terrible, never saved anything, but God provided for me by providing a career with a company that did all the savings for me. Procter & Gamble has a phenomenal profit sharing trust plan that took care of me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So God provided.
Yeah.
And so I just put into the chat a little question. In your formula about saving, you didn't say anything about putting money aside to give. Giving to God that is what I've found is that's even more significant than giving to your own savings account,
Right.
because I've found that you cannot outgive God. So
Good point.
so that's anyway. That's my only contribution there.
So you
Thank
give
you,
God,
George.
save some, and live on the rest. By the way, let me tell you a quick Procter and Gamble story. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Ray. About 100 years ago, the board of directors of Procter and Gamble made 3 profound questions that have never been moved from. Number one, that no matter how much money they made, they'd put 13% of their gross income into marketing. Number two, they would never change the number of dollars, regardless of how, they would never change the percentage regardless of how large the dollars became. And number three, they would always have an outside agency for objectivity. That's why today they can introduce a product with $20 million or $50 million to really launch it properly, because they've got that marketing logic. And they basically said 100 years ago, this is policy. This is board level policy. We will not change that policy. Now, is that your memory as well?
The largest market,
Now,
at least during my career. I don't know if today somebody exceeds P&G for marketing, but that strategy has been very effective.
let me share with you where it becomes helpful perspective. And that is, you're talking to a church or a pastor and he says, man, we just can't get people to come, or, that kind of, our church isn't growing. I tell them the Procter & Gamble story. And then I say, let me ask you this. What percentage of your gross income are you putting into communications, to marketing, to advertising? Like 1/10 of 1%. I say, then is it any mystery why you're not growing? And so it's just a fun little story, but it helps the church realize that there are a lot of people that want to go to that church. They just don't know about it. So anyway, that's my favorite Procter & Gamble story. Other questions?
Yeah, Bob. This is Chris. I'm the gentleman that works with Crew now. So all the names that you said were good. They're great heroes to me.
Yes.
Definitely. You talked
By the way,
about.
how long you're in Russia?
Yeah, I'm in Moscow.
How long have you been in Eastern Europe?
20 years.
Did you know Bud Hinkson?
Well, I know his wife, but he went to be with the Lord before I got here.
All right. Well, I consulted with Bud back when it was still, Vienna was still behind the curtain. So,
Well, he is an indirect reason as to why I'm here. So,
right.
My kids go to Hinkson Christian Academy. It's named after him.
Great.
But you talked about significance in the 40s and being connected to making a difference that lasts a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And can you expound maybe on some ways that we can invest for eternity?
Right. Now, first of all, it's important to understand that a high percentage of the men on this screen are significance driven, but not all of them. Some of them are respect driven. Some are more security driven. There are 8 reasons people do what they do: to be loved, significant, admired, appreciated, secure, respected, and accepted. Recognized as well. And so a lot of people, I wrote a book called Why You Do What You Do that explains all this. But a lot of people are not motivated to making a significant difference. But some people, that's number 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, that's the most important. That's where I am. It's like the most important thing to me of all is to make a significant difference. Here's an interesting kicker. A lot of non-believers that you talk to, men you've worked with over the years, have been significance driven. The only problem is they can never make a truly significant difference. Because like I say, if the difference they're making lasts a day, but then it goes away, how significant was that? If it lasts 5 years, 10 years, what if it even lasts 50 years? the last 50 years, but then it goes away. How significant is it? It's only relatively significant. It isn't truly significant. And therefore, the only thing that will make a truly significant difference is making a difference that lasts over eternity. Now, you ask, so that's important to understand that from my perspective. And that's how does significance work? But Christians versus non-Christians significant. But how do you make that significant difference? There are many ways. The way I've done it is not through evangelism, like through Bud Hinkson, like Bud Hinkson did it. The way I do it is much more through strengthening Christian leaders than it is being an out front Christian leader. I tried to do everything I could to strengthen Bud Hinkson, Larry Thompson, Bill Bright. It's like all the leaders I saw when I was 34 years old, that my role wasn't to be the speaker. It's like I speak about twice a year. I even do something like this once or twice a year. But what I'm best at is one-to-one with someone like yourself, saying, what are your plans and how can I help? And just staying with you to help you get done what you want, to help you, like Evangelism Explosion. I was working with them, Jim Kennedy. They were my first client ever before Crusade. But Evangelism Explosion process. Archie Perry said, without understanding process, we would have closed our doors. But by teaching them process, last year they saw 10 million people come to Christ. I'm not an evangelist like a Jim Kennedy or an Archie Parrish or John Sorensen. But my role is to strengthen them. One way to do it is to be out evangelizing. One way is to strengthen the Christian leaders, because every single organization is a direct reflection of the leadership it's been given, and reflects both their strengths and their weaknesses. So the stronger I can make the leader of Cru or Evangelism Explosion or His Deal or anywhere, the stronger I can make the leader, the more effective that organization is in reaching people, etc. Some people are much more, they're not consultants like me, they're mentors to young leaders coming up. I had leaders care for me when I was 8, 9 years old that made a huge difference in my life. My grandfather, who had a second grade education, like Doug's family, it's like he was a shoe cobbler, but he really introduced me to Christ. Well, he was just a guy that took care of an 8-year-old. But because of him is the reason I'm sitting here today. And I say, so some of it is just caring for children. Some of it is discipling people and helping them grow in their faith. So there are a lot of different ways to help strengthen the body of Christ.
Bob, give us a thumbnail on process.
Process?
Yes.
Process, a friend of mine had taught it to me, changed my life forever. He said, Bob, he was a electrical engineer that worked as one of 400 Bell Labs engineers to help launch the first moonshot. And he said, Bob, do you realize that there are only 8 steps involved in the moonshot? I said, really, what are they? He said, well, you build a rocket, you launch the rocket, you orbit the rocket, you put it to the moon, you land, He said, only 8 steps, really. But he said, as you take each one of those and break it down, he said there were 20,000 steps that had to be checked off before we got to the moon. And he said, Bell Labs had 400 engineers like me that were assigned certain steps that we had to go and check. Was that done properly? Was that done properly? Is it going to get there on time, et cetera? And so each of those process steps, really work together to get major things done. Well, I was telling Doug this morning that when you've got a major project that you're doing, by the way, process is the key to transferability. If you've got something you want to transfer to other people, process is the key to it, to basically ask them, did they understand this step, this step, this step, and when they get to the point where they understand all the steps, you've basically gotten whatever you're trying to teach them transferred to them. But what I've found is that any major project that we're doing, typically it's about 30 steps that start out from where you want to end up. Well, to get to where you want to end up, what has to happen before that can happen? And then what happens to happen before those can happen? And basically, when you bring it back to today at about a 30-step level, not 3 steps, not 300 steps, but about 30 steps is about the number that it takes to get on top of any major program. Once you get those 30 steps on a big sheet of paper or on a computer program like Doug uses, once you get those 30 steps out and done, then you can say to yourself, okay, if these are the 30 steps it takes to get this program launched, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I rate my confidence that that step is ready? This is a 10, this is a 10, this is an 8, this is a 10, this is a 10, this is a 3. Anything you rate from 0 to 5 is a red, meaning it is in real trouble. It's a flashing red light. In other words, it is a problem to building your system. Anything you rate 6 or 7 is a yellow, meaning you don't know yet whether it's red or green. Anything 8, 9, or 10 is green. It may be able to be improved, but it's pretty good the way it is. So you've got these 30 steps. You can go through it and improve the process, get it set up right, or you can go through and teach it to the person to whom you're transferring it. You can teach it to them generally and say, I'd like to teach it to you. Well, I developed the Love Loaf program for World Vision. You may have seen it, a little shape of money, little money container in the shape of a loaf of bread. We had 42 steps with that one. When I transferred it to the lady who took it over, there are 42 steps. In 2.5 hours, I transferred a multi-million-dollar project. She never called me one time to ask, well, how does this work? I had a notebook that basically said 42 step tab dividers. I say, anything you want to know about step 1, I'm going to go over it with you in person and show you where go through the tab divider is. And do you have any questions on tab 1? No. Tab 2, tab 3. Here's the policy we set. Here's what we always do or never do policy. Here's the procedures, the step-by-step. Here's an example of the brochure. Here's our network communications. Everything was set for each one of those 42 steps. I said, do you have any questions of me at all? I think I've got it. And I said, if you have any questions, this is my baby. Call me night or day. She never called one time. So process is what all of your policies and procedures and examples and network and budget forecasting, everything is hanging on your 30-step process. But your first key is to define what is that process. And the question that it's answering is the what question, not why, how, who. It is a what question. What do we want to see done? And then what has to happen before that can happen? What has to happen before that can happen? What has to happen before that can happen? So you're basically bringing back from the result you want to see back to today at about 30 mega steps, which can help you launch a rocket. It can help you launch an automobile manufacturing company. It can help you launch anything you're trying to launch and make transferable to someone else.
You know, you guys have to jump in with a question because I've always got questions for Bob. Let me throw another one at you, Bob. About 3 or 4 years ago, Doug Peterson and I went to meet the new dean of a business school, the University Business School. And we said to him, here's a body of information, a body of teaching that, as far as we're aware of, is not being offered to business students in college these days. The kind of information that you teach and coach. Why is that? And I thought that the school would just go nuts over this material from bobbeal.com. And I've never heard another word from them. Maybe they've adopted it. I don't know. But the question is there a school in the country that you've had left your fingerprints on and they've adopted your material in their curriculum? And if not, why not?
Schools have never been my target. I basically looked at leaders of Christian organizations or leaders of corporations, Christian organizations or churches. I have not focused on schools at all. There are schools that use various of my tools. There's a school that uses 30, 40, 50 of my team profiles a year. There's another school that uses our strategic planning, or about 100 of those a year. There are schools that use various tools, but none of them that are developing it as a full-blown curriculum. And again, I have not approached any of them. That's not been. I've had 4 groups really: churches, larger growing churches, nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations with Christian leadership. I don't care to help a guy who is making $1 billion and ruining his kids with it to be on drugs. It's like, I want a Christian organization that's a business, and then some political departments like Office of Personnel Management, Justice Department in DC. I've worked with them, but not schools. For some reason, I just haven't felt that was, for some reason, I just didn't do it that way.
Ed McCahill, you had a question for Bob.
I did. So, Bob, you're in your 70s now, the decade of succession.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Ed.
Okay, I'm having a little problem with my microphone here. So,
Okay, I can hear a lot better now. Yeah.
Okay. So, being in your 70s now, the decade of succession, have you identified your successor yet? And if so, how have you been preparing them to be your successor?
I have, yes. There are 2 main things that I want to be a successor in. One is our consulting institute, which Doug went to, and that is, I'm giving that to 2 men. One in Vancouver, Dan Loney, who you may know. Matter of fact, he was your speaker there a while ago. Dan Loney is the one I've transferred the consulting institute to, and one man in Washington D.C., Keith Battle, who is a man out there. And basically, these are people who came to the Institute and how would I say it, couldn't get over how much they'd grown because of it. It was like, man, I can apply this everywhere all the time. Can I come back next time? I want to learn this more and more. Keith said, I'll have one. He said, I'll be back here every single time you have one, because I realize I just don't even, there's no way I can comprehend it all right now. And so those 2, there's a phrase I have that I've used many, many times: work with the willing. There may be someone who has as much or more ability, but if they're not willing, I don't want to work with them. I don't want to waste my time trying to convince them that they should be willing to do it. And then the other one is a man in Dallas, Texas, who is taking over, and we're pretty close. We've already talked about the agreement. It looks like he will do it once we get it going at a certain level. What we call our Alan Publishing, which is all of our tools, our books, tapes, videos, that kind of thing. And he will be taking that over. And as far as me consulting, years ago, I concluded there are 3 levels of leadership. One is presidential captain, who is a person who wants to be president of whatever they're involved in. They want to be the head, the president, the senior pastor. They want to be in charge of everything they're involved in. They want to be in charge of General Motors. And there are other people who prefer to be a middle captain. They want to be in charge of Chevrolet division, but not General Motors. They want to be in charge of the Christian education department, but not the senior pastor. Then there are other people who want to be a strong player. Their role, they don't really enjoy building a team at all, really. They may score more points than anyone, but they don't want to be the captain. I was talking with Josh McDowell one day, and I was explaining this, And Josh said, I'm a strong player. Any one of you who know Josh McDowell, you know who Josh is. Chris, you know Josh, and you know he is not a weak person. A strong player he is, but I thought he would certainly want to build a team. And I said, so Josh, I said, let me explain this again because I don't think I've made it clear. He said, oh, you made it clear, Bob. But I am a strong player. I don't want to build a team. He said, if I had my preference, someone would introduce me. I'd get up, I'd go up on the stage, I'd talk, I'd go down, I'd go to my hotel, and that'd be it. Well, a while ago, maybe 20 years ago, I was trying to build a team of consultants. Then, on an associate basis to build a consulting firm, I realized that I'm a strong player by nature, not a middle captain, certainly not a presidential captain. I love helping strong leaders reach their potential, but building an associate team or consulting firm was not my idea of fun. So I thought, what I'd really like to do is build a 1-week program where I teach all I know about consulting, called the Consulting Institute, and let it go at that. Call that good. And that's what the two guys are taking over. And all of my tools is what the guy in Dallas is taking over. So basically, everything that I look back on and say I've wanted to contribute to has been about 500 presidents, trying to help them, like a George, keep doing everything he's doing for life stronger. And then the publishing tools, I want to go on for 100 years. The written word remains, according to the Latin phrase. The written word remains, but also the video word remains. So I'm doing everything I can to not only write, but to do things on video that can keep going 100 years. They're profoundly simple. They're not time dated. So they can help someone from a just starting leadership to the president of the country. The same principles, like the decade by decade. He'd like you to come, like suggesting, I'd like you to come next week to talk to our cabinet. If we talked about cabinet, talk to the cabinet, is there anyone here who didn't benefit from hearing decade by decade? I don't think so. And I don't think the top people in the land, the top leaders on the president's cabinet, would also benefit from, I'm 50 years old, I'm head of this, but where do I go from here? Or am I over the hill? Or, it's like, so if I can strengthen the leaders I consult with, if I can put together things in a book and a tape that'll go for 100 years, hopefully, and if I can transfer the Consulting Institute, which will help develop other consultants for the future that I don't have to manage, I think pretty good place to call it good.
Bob, we got about 3 minutes before we want to talk about sharing our faith concept, and I want to hear from a couple of guys. What are you taking away from today's meeting? What lit your fire?
Well, it all lit my fire. It's all rich, very rich stuff. Appreciate your experiences, Bob.
Thank you.
In mentoring, and what I love the idea of one-on-one coaching that has changed lives. And so, being a strong player is being a leader. In changing the world for Christ by just being there. So and it's all about relationship.
Yeah.
So that's it just reinforces for me the importance of relationships and having eyes and ears to be open to, Lord, who is it that you want me to reach out to mentor, and who is it that you want me to reach out to mentor me?
let me give you a quick story about Bill Bright. I always tried to give more to Bill on a day that he was paying me for than I got from him, but a lot of times it didn't work that way. I said to him one day, I said, Bill, how do you look at a day? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't think I can make it any clearer. How do you look at a day? When you get out of the shower and do your devotions, how do you look at a day? He said, oh, okay. He said, they hand me an agenda of people I'm supposed to meet with that day. And he said, I pray and I say, Lord, anyone that you don't want me to meet with today, take them out of this schedule and help me not to be disappointed. And he said, and anyone that comes into the schedule that I wasn't expecting, help me not to be frustrated because I know that's you. And he said, then I go about my day. I thought, what a phenomenal principle. And I've told that to a lot of people because it really helps us get comfortable with the people who come and go that we're not expecting in our lives. And so that, Ray, I hope was meaningful at the same time.
Okay, talk to us about this, Bob, sharing our faith.
Well, basically, Sharing Our Faith, that's a brochure that explains how you use decade by decade book as a ministry. And it basically explains the importance of evangelism, heaven and hell, but it basically explains that I've never been an evangelist. I think I've led maybe one or maybe two people to Christ in my entire lifetime. I've been involved in helping a lot of people who do lead a lot of people, but I'm just not an evangelist. But as Bill Bright was gone, Jim Kennedy was gone, Adrian Rogers is gone, the people that I've helped a lot have been gone. I thought, how can I share my faith more effectively? So that's when part of the reason this decade by decade became a book that it's a way I can share my faith with confidence and never talk to a person. If I don't feel comfortable sharing my faith, which I in many ways don't, I can just leave this book knowing that whoever picks it up in the next 30 years will have an opportunity to hear how to know they're going to heaven when they die. And so that's sharing your faith. It's basically, how do you take a book? And it doesn't have to be this book. It could be your book, could be someone else's book that's got a subject that people like to read, but within it is hidden the gospel. And you buy those you can buy these very reasonably if you want to give them away, basically. Doug, do you care if I talk about how much? Doug?
No, you can do whatever you'd like.
Okay, basically, these sell for $20 and they're selling very well on our website. But I got the idea of book evangelism or sharing your faith, where Cheryl and I consider this one of our life ministries. And so we're making them available for $2 a book, plus postage and handling. And when Doug has agreed to give each one of you a book. Doug is he's ordered them, and he's going to send you or give you, each one of you are going to get a book called Decade by Decade, which you can read through it. And if you like it, ask yourself, which of my children should read it? Which of my aunts and uncles that I care about, but I don't know how to open the conversation with the gospel? The agnostic high school teacher you had that you don't know how to talk to, the guy that's been your enemy all your life. But basically, how do you share the gospel with someone that you don't quite know how to open the conversation? So you can get these books for $2 a piece plus postage. You have to get them 10 at a time, but basically $2 a piece, brand new, $20 book. They go to order them, they're $20 on my website to just give as many as you care to give. By the way, some men's groups are ordering these for men's groups to give away. They're saying, hey, men's group, let's order 100 of these and we'll give them to the men in the church and you can just give them away. And then they're also a book for Christmas. You can get them for $2 for Christmas because it's giving them, if you have someone you want to give a little Christmas gift to, a $20 Christmas gift, go ahead and give it to them if they're the person you want to share your faith with. So that's sort of a background on sharing your faith.